Hello and welcome to the Seattle Atheist Church. Atheists, agnostics, skeptics, free thinkers, questioning, and believers. Whatever you like to call yourselves, you're welcome here. At the Seattle Atheist Church, we call ourselves an atheist church because you will never hear anything supernatural promoted from the podium. The Seattle Atheist Church was founded on the principles of scientific naturalism and secular ethics, which commits us on one hand to reason and evidence-based thinking, and on the other, to compassion for our fellow human beings. These commitments motivate us to oppose magical and wishful thinking and all forms of dogma, as well as to stand firmly against all forms of oppression. Truth claims are attempted here, and we stand ready to revise our thinking in light of new information. We attempt to be excellent to other conscious beings. We believe in good because good works in non-mysterious ways. That sounds right to you, then you're probably in the right place.
Okay, so this talk today is, it's about Just Right Challenge, the zone of proximal development. And this is a concept from educational theory and occupational therapy, but it applies to any learning context, whether you're teaching in a classroom or parenting your own child, or trying to train an employee or coach a band or a team, or if you're trying to learn a skill yourself. This all applies. We're all learning, even if we're not officially teachers. So we can learn these principles to learn and to teach more effectively. So first of all, what is the zone of proximal development? It's a complicated name, but it's actually a pretty simple concept. Proximal means near, as in approximate, and the zone of proximal development is the area where your student is ready to learn the next step. So this is the area of difficulty where we're not wasting time going over something they've already mastered, and we're not skipping steps and losing them. We're building on what they've learned, and we're taking them one step further. This concept and the name zone of proximal development was developed by the Soviet psychologist and social constructivist Lev Vygotsky, and it's kind of the foundation of the constructivist teaching approach, where the student is constructing their own learning rather than just being told what they're supposed to know. The zone of proximal development has been defined as the distance between the actual developmental level as determined by independent problem solving and the level of potential development as determined through problem solving under adult guidance or in collaboration with more capable peers. So basically, this is the space between what they can do on their own and what they can do with some help. We don't want to get into what they've already been doing on their own forever. They don't need to practice that with a teacher. And we don't want to get into what they can't do at all, even if you do help them. That's a waste of time too. We want to be in that zone where they can do some of it on their own, they can do some of it with help, and we're going to provide them that help to help them advance that zone a little farther along. So new learning should be built on and connected to existing learning. The teacher is providing support as the student is practicing the new skill, and the support allows the student to do things that they couldn't do completely on their own. The support is called scaffolding. Just like you put scaffolding around a building until you've built up those parts, then you can take the scaffolding away. Scaffolding in education means you're providing just enough support to let the student learn something, and then you can take those pieces away as they master those skills and can do them on their own. So one familiar example of scaffolding is training wheels. You put training wheels on a bike so that the kid can ride it without falling over when they haven't learned how to balance yet. So that way they can practice steering, they can practice pedaling, they can practice using the brakes, and they don't have to at the same time balance. There are other approaches to this. You can also hang on to the back of their bike until they're pedaling fast and then let go. That's a kind of scaffolding too, but it creates a high cost to failure. If they then slow down, they're probably going to fall over. So there are good and bad ways to try scaffolding. The more popular modern approach to teaching a kid to ride a bike is actually to give them something called a balance bike, which doesn't even have pedals or brakes and is low to the ground. You put a little kid on this and they push it along with their feet, and they learn that if they get it going fast enough, it'll balance, and they learn to steer the bike that is balancing, but they don't have to pedal at the same time and falling over. They're only tipping over sideways because it's really low to the ground and they're little kids. So there are multiple ways to scaffold, and it allows you to focus on one skill at a time or one cluster of skills at a time and make failure lower cost. That's key to this. With balance bikes, you're training the trickiest aspect in a really intuitive way, and you're taking away the risk of falling over on a full-size bicycle because you never learned how to ride a bike until you were 12 or something like that. There are lots and lots of skills that are like riding a bicycle in that they involve integrating multiple sub-skills, and the beginner might not have any of them yet, so you have to start somewhere. And if failure hurts too much or is too dangerous, the student will be frightened to try and will withdraw. Danger or pain is literal and physical. In the case of learning to ride a bike, you really don't want to fall off and scrape your knees or hit your head. Helmets are helpful, knee pads are helpful, going slowly at first is helpful. There are lots of ways you can lower the risk. The balance bike does that in a whole bunch of ways at once. But that danger and pain is also there in cases where the learning is not physical. It's definitely present. There's a huge threat to the ego, to the self, in trying something. If failure means you're going to be ridiculed by your classmates, you're going to be yelled at by the teacher, you're going to feel really embarrassed, you're going to be punished. We want to lower those costs. We want to make it easy and okay to fail, and also make success more frequent. We want it to be okay to fail for our student or ourselves if we're trying to learn, and we want to set ourselves or our student up for success. So we want to give them the information, the tools, and the support they need to use their new skill a little bit and see how that works, and then use it a little more. We don't want to just throw someone into the deep end to learn how to swim. That's not a good approach because they might drown. And even if they don't drown, they might have enough of a traumatic experience that not only are they not learning how to swim today, they never want to go near a pool again. You can really damage learning if you make learning traumatizing. Sometimes people think that their job as a parent or a teacher is to toughen kids up. Sometimes managers get this idea too, that they need to be tough on their employees, make it hard, because that's how people build character and grit and resilience. And it's actually not. It's really harmful to people to make it hard on them unnecessarily. It is better for developing resilience if people can experience success along the way so that they feel hope, they feel their own sense of capability growing, and they can build on that. And if they know it's okay to fail, so they can try new things without being scared. Because actually, nobody can learn when they're in a state of fear. It's not helpful to be afraid because your high processing brain, your more complex thinking actually shuts down when you're in a fear state. You're busy directing all your energy to your limbs in case you need to run away or something. You're not using your higher functions. So learning is damaged by being afraid that something's going to happen if you do something wrong. You want to set up a state where it's just fine to make a mistake and it's interesting and you can learn what happened this time and then try it a different way. That's the state you want to have your students be in or yourself be in for learning. This is especially critical. You really, really want to make it low stakes and gentle for either very young learners who are just getting their first impressions of what learning is about, and for people whose learning has been traumatic in the past. Struggling learners who are way behind in school. They've had lots of experience of failure, and I assure you they've been punished for it. Even if no one thought they were being mean, somebody was making fun of them or laughing or looking disappointed. And those are all really traumatizing experiences for kids who are watching their peers do this easily and they can't. They're going to have lots of thinking of themselves as failures, and you have to be really gentle and careful working with those kids to help them learn and learn how to learn. This is also going to be true for adults who've had experiences of being abused or being treated badly in work or in spiritual environments where they've been fed messages of shame and disappointment. People who've been abused and people who've experienced a lot of failure need the best teaching. They need very sensitive teaching. So everybody deserves with respect and met exactly where they are for their learning, but it's especially true for our most vulnerable learners, whether it's because they're beginners or because they've had bad experiences. Here's an example of working with this zone of proximal development and all the things that need to be learned along the way. This is from my experience as a reading teacher. I work as a supplemental instructor, a tutor for reading and writing and math for kids from kindergarten through middle school, and sometimes with older people. In order to read out loud with understanding, a student needs to be able to recognize letters and associate them with their sounds, also letter combinations in all different contexts. Those contexts are often contradictory, so we've got all kinds of ridiculous rules in English. Blend the sounds together and recognize the words that are then made. Know what the words mean, know what phrases that they're in mean, follow the logic of a sentence, recognize sight words that may not follow the phonetic rules at all, articulate the words out loud for reading out loud, string them together at a reasonable speaking pace, and extract meaning from them at the same time. That's a heck of a lot of skills. And we're like, why can't this kid read? Well, can they do all of these things? Can they do them all at once? That's a lot. So as a reading teacher, I check all of those levels, and then I work on each of those levels. And I work on the lowest ones first, and then I work on them in combination. But I don't just work on the lowest thing. That's not respecting where the kid is either. I work on all their growth surfaces. So if a kid can comprehend a story at a lot higher level than they can read, I'll read that story to them. We'll talk about it, and I'll have them read the words they can. And we're also working on getting those B and D sounds sorted out because they have the letters flipped. Or we're also working on putting 4 sounds together because that's a little tricky. Or we're also working on forming the W because they get lost. You know, we can work on all these different levels at the same time. Well, in alternation. And then once they've mastered them, we can work on them at the same time. So for writing, you have to do all those skills backwards, and you have to be able to form the letters with your hands. You might have trouble holding a pencil or remembering where the keys are. You have to physically form those letters of the right shape and size and in the right place. And that's a heck of a lot at once. So if I want a student to be able to write an answer to a question, and maybe they can't do all those things at once, I might have them tell me their answer. I'll write it down, I'll feed it back to them, and they write it down. And then I help them with the spelling. So that way we're breaking it down into smaller skills, and they don't have to simultaneously understand what they're being asked and form sentences out of it, and remember it all, write it down, form the letters, spell. We don't have to do all the things at once. We can do them one bit at a time. So that way we can work on the bits that are tricky and build on the skills that are already mastered. So I work on all the growth edges at once. When I say at once, I mean like within a session, but not simultaneously. So we'll work a little bit on letter sounds, a little bit on kinds of syllable types, reading some words, spelling some words, reading a passage, answering questions about it, and then maybe reading some text that they're not quite ready for on their own. If they don't know all the letter sounds, I'll introduce 1 or 2 in that session, and we'll read some words with them, and we'll spell some words with them, and we'll even read a story that uses mostly those sounds, and then we'll also read some stories that are beyond them right now independently. If they're not ready to read natural text yet, that's okay, I can read it to them, and they can read the 3-letter words when we get to them. There are lots of different levels you can be at in different skills. There's a difference between accuracy and fluency. You can be accurate with your math facts, as in, if I give you a multiplication problem, you can come up with the answer, but maybe it takes you a while because actually you're adding to get to that. So you're accurate, but you're not yet fluent. And you want to be fluent if you're going to be using those math facts in an algebra problem, and you're going to have to be thinking about fractions and exponents. You really want to have those multiplication facts down. So there are multiple ways in which you can know something, and we're going to keep coming back to something. One of the guidelines that's used in many classrooms for independent reading is called the 5-finger rule, and this is kind of a way to keep in that zone of proximal development. When a kid is picking out a book to read on their own, you have them hold up their hand and read a page. And when they hit a word they don't know, they put up a finger. If they just have 1 or 2 fingers, it's a fine book for them to read on their own. None, that's a really easy book. They might want to move on, have a little bit of a challenge. If they have 3 or 4, that's a pretty challenging book. And if they have 5, that's a lot, so they might be missing some of the content. If it's more than 5, that's probably too hard because they're going to be missing a lot on that page. That's a better book for guided reading where they'll have a little help with the words. So the idea of that is to keep us in this zone where we just need a little bit of work that we need to do. We can maybe figure it out from context or sound out that word with a little work, or just skip it and we'll get the rest. But if we have too big a challenge, we're going to miss a bunch and it's going to be really frustrating. If we have no challenge, we're not really learning anything from reading that book. Might still be fun, that's okay, but we want to at least some of the time be reading books that are stretching us a little bit. So that's a really simple piece of practice that is actually keeping kids in the zone of proximal development. The phrase just right challenge, I put it in the title of my talk. It turns out it's a piece of jargon from occupational therapy. Occupational therapy is a practice where you help people who've maybe been injured or who have developmental issues to do tasks that are harder for them than for the average person, maybe recovering from a brain injury or a physical, like a muscular or skeletal injury, and you need to relearn how to do something, or you need to learn to do it for the first time because you haven't learned it the way most people learn it. That's what occupational therapists do. And the just right challenge is exactly what the zone of proximal development is in standard educational practice. You want to give your client or your patient a challenge that builds on what they can do and is just the right size that they can put some effort into it and develop this skill. If it's too hard, it's not helpful. You might actually injure them, and you certainly won't be helping them build the skill. If it's too easy, you're wasting their time and their money. You want to have just right challenge. The idea is grading or adapting an activity to be not too difficult that it feels unachievable and not too easy that it is not beneficial. And there are lots of ways to make a task more manageable if it's too hard. They have all kinds of systems for this in occupational therapy that also apply if we're trying to learn a skill in some other context. So some examples of ways you can adapt a skill. Pull with a website here. You can decrease the number of times they have to do the activity. Like maybe to climb the stairs, you have to climb like 25 stairs. But right now, today, we're just going to take 1 step and step back. 1 step, step back. You don't have to climb all the way up and then come all the way down. That's too much today. You can decrease the amount of time the client has to do something for. We're going to pick something up and hold it for just a second. Chain the activity so that they're just doing the first step or they're just doing the last step, and we'll build in other steps of it later. You can take turns so they get breaks. I do that with the reading. Add in visual cues to help them remember where they are in the process. You can add in physical guidelines, like when I give a kid paper with dotted lines on it. You can adjust the physical environment so that it's easier or less distracting, or they're in a chair that provides better support, or they have a pencil grip that helps encourage the right grip on the writing implement. And you can just work on 1 step at a time, whichever step is going to be either most useful or most approachable to start with. So there are lots and lots of ways that you can make a task more approachable and work on bits of it to get it to just right challenge size. So reminder, these principles are for you, not just other people that you're teaching. If you're learning something, don't expect yourself to get everything at once. Break it down, start with what you already know and build on that. Find ways to work on one skill at a time and then integrate them at a pace that works for you, and make failure low stakes so you can easily try again and learn from mistakes. When we revisit skills that we've previously learned, but now we're hitting on a higher level or more complex context, that's called spiral learning or the spiral curriculum. And that is a model of learning that is also really popular in schools today. And it's really clearly what happens in, say, math, where we learn to add, and then we learn how to do other operations, and maybe we learn about fractions, and now suddenly we need to add fractions. So we're back over here with addition, but we're doing addition on a more complex level now. And we're going to learn all those other operations with fractions. We're going to learn about decimals. Now we have to do addition with decimals. So we're going to do this over and over again. We're going to do it when we hit negative numbers. We're going to do it when we hit algebra. Now we're adding whole expressions together, and they might have negative numbers and exponents in them, and we have to learn how to address all that. It's not that we didn't master addition. We mastered addition right here. Now we're coming around, we're mastering it here, and we'll come around and we'll master it here. There's always going to be more to learn about addition. It's not that you didn't learn it the first time, it's that now you're ready to hit it in a more complex context. This happens all the time in personal stuff too. You may have learned a self-help principle or a communication principle or something about your partner that leads you to work with them better. And then suddenly you realize you're hitting your head against the same problem that you thought you'd mastered. Well, you're hitting that not because you didn't master it, but because now you can see where it fits into a more complex context, and you need to learn it in that context. So don't be down on yourself because you've hit another level of the spiral. Of course, you're hitting another level of the spiral. You've moved on. Now you can see how this fits into this new thing. So that's an important piece too. The more you learn, the farther you can see. So you can now see what that next step is. Your zone of proximal development is farther out on this same skill that you've already learned in another context. So far, I've mostly talked about making it not too hard, but it's also really important not to make it too easy. If you zone out your students by patronizing them or insulting them by giving them stuff that they already have mastered long ago, and you're not giving them any new information, they will not only zone out now, they will learn that learning is boring and that they don't need to pay attention because it's all old hat stuff, and they'll miss the next stuff that is actually new. If you've lost your students, they're not going to learn the new stuff either. Sometimes people think, oh, gifted kids will be fine. They're going to catch this stuff easily, so we can just ignore them and focus on the kids who are behind. You know what? If you ignore those gifted kids, not only are they going to disrupt your classroom because they're bored, you're also going to lose them as students. They're going to learn that school sucks and the teachers are dumb because they never teach you anything new. So it's just as important to engage your advanced students and your gifted kids as it is to engage the ones that are falling behind now. Because those students will fall behind in the future if you don't feed them now. Got to give them somewhere to go with their quick understanding. So if you're teaching a wide range of skill levels in one classroom or one team at work or all your kids at home or whatever, you're going to have to differentiate your learning. You want to make sure everybody gets this core concept. You want all your students or all your employees or whatever to get this basic idea. And you want most of them to get this set of skills right here. Maybe not everybody can get all of them, but you try to get most people to get all of them. And then you might have a few really quick students who've gotten this down right away. You want them to have somewhere to go with this too. Feed them a little extra. Give them, here's another resource. Here's an extra page that goes a little more complexly. Here's a link you can follow if you want more information. You want them to have somewhere to go once they've mastered what you gave everybody else. So we want to try to give room for everybody at whatever level they're at. And the final thing I'd like to do with this concept of the zone of proximal development is place it in the framework of the character traits and virtues. This book that's kind of one we keep coming back to in Seattle Atheist Church. It's designed as a counterpart to the DSM-5, which is the catalog of all the mental illnesses you can have. This is all the mental wellnesses you can have. This is how to be a healthy person mentally. And the way using the zone of proximal development fits into this is that we want to use the learner's abilities and their responses to craft lessons that are just the right level of difficulty. And when we do that, we're fostering love of learning and open-mindedness and curiosity. This is what we want in our students so that they are learning and will continue to learn. And to do that, we are using our virtues of humanity. We're using kindness and social intelligence. We're also using virtues of temperance, prudence, and self-regulation to measure our response to where we observe they are. So we're going to use our wisdom, our temperance, and our humanity to guide them in their wisdom and knowledge. So this is a bunch of pieces of the virtues and character traits. It will help your students, your kids, your employees, your family members, your housemates, and you to learn in a more effective and kinder